Would you like to make a podcast? Spotify has a way to let you make one easily, distribute it everywhere, and even earn money, all in one place, for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit right from your phone or computer, so you can start creating today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify, and everywhere else podcasts are heard. And video podcasts are also available on Spotify. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. And best of all, it's totally free. You know, ever since I discovered Spotify for Podcasters, I've enjoyed sharing my favorite stories with children around the world. If you've ever thought of starting your own podcast, download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to spotify.com/podcasters to get started. Welcome to Bedtime Stories. Please make sure you subscribe to get notified of new stories and, of course, share them with a friend. And now, Bedtime Stories presents Sleeping Beauty. Once upon a time, there lived a king and queen. When the queen gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, the king and queen were filled with joy and decided to hold a christening feast to celebrate. They invited their friends and all the kings and queens, princes and princesses from other kingdoms all over the land. 5 good fairies lived in the kingdom, and the king wanted them to be the godmothers for his daughter. One of the fairies was very old, and no one had seen her in years, or even knew where she was. So when the king sent out the invitations to his daughter's christening, he invited only the 4 young fairies. The day of the christening arrived. It was a joyous occasion. The palace was full of laughter and dancing. After the delicious feast, the 4 good fairies gave the princess their magical gifts. Bending over the crib, the first fairy waved her wand and said, "You shall be kind and considerate." The second fairy said, "You shall be beautiful and loving." The third fairy said, "You shall be clever and thoughtful." The baby girl was promised everything in the world you could wish for. But just as the third fairy finished giving her gift, there was a loud bang, and the palace doors flew open. It was the old fairy. She was furious because she hadn't been invited to the feast. She rushed over to the sleeping baby, waved her wand, casting a curse upon the child. "One day, the king's daughter shall prick her finger on a spindle and fall down dead," she screeched. And then she left. The guests fell silent at these terrible words, and the queen burst into tears. The fourth fairy had not given her gift. "Dear queen, please do not weep. I cannot undo the curse, but I can soften it," she said. She walked to the crib and waved her wand. "The princess will prick her finger on a spindle, but she will not die. Instead, the princess and everyone within the palace and its grounds will fall into a deep sleep that will last for 100 years. The king thanked the fairy for her kindness, and then, to protect his daughter, ordered that every spindle in the kingdom be burned. The years passed, and the princess grew into a beautiful, kind young woman, just as the fairies had promised. One day, to amuse herself, the princess decided to explore the rooms in the palace that she had never been in before. After a while, she came to a little door at the top of a tall tower. Inside there was an old woman working at her spinning wheel. The princess didn't know the woman was really the old fairy in disguise. "What are you doing?" the princess asked curiously. "I'm spinning thread, dear child," replied the woman. "Can I try?" said the princess. No sooner had she touched the spindle than she pricked her finger and fell into a deep, deep sleep. A strange quietness came over the palace. from the grounds to the tallest tower, and then the king and queen began to yawn. Before long, every living thing within the castle walls had fallen into a deep sleep. As time passed, a hedge of thorns sprang up around the palace. It grew higher and thicker every year, until only the tallest towers could be seen above it. The story of the beautiful princess that lay sleeping within the walls of the castle spread throughout the land. She became known as Sleeping Beauty. Many princes tried to break through the thorns to rescue Sleeping Beauty, but none were successful. The thorn hedge was too thick. Exactly 100 years after the princess had fallen asleep, a handsome prince, having heard the story of Sleeping Beauty, decided to try and break the curse and awaken the sleeping princess. The prince didn't know that the fairy spell was coming to an end. As he pushed against the thick hedge, every thorn turned into a beautiful rose, and the path magically formed to let him pass. Soon the prince got to the palace. Not a sound could be heard anywhere. He saw people and animals asleep in every room. At last, he found the tiny room in the tower where Sleeping Beauty lay. The prince looked at her in wonder, and then kissed her gently. The sleeping princess opened her eyes and smiled up at the prince. With that one look, they fell in love. All around the palace, other people were waking up. The king and queen stirred from their deep sleep and were overjoyed to see their daughter awake. They welcomed the handsome prince, who had found their princess. The palace was once again filled with laughter and joy. The king called for a huge wedding feast to be prepared, and he invited everyone in the entire kingdom. Sleeping Beauty married her handsome prince, and they lived happily ever after. Thank you for listening to Bedtime Stories. Please make sure you press subscribe to follow us for new stories, and of course, share them with a friend. If you have a suggestion for a new story, send us an email, magicmonorail@gmail.com. You can get notified of new stories on Instagram @magicmonorail. Until next time, good night.